The crystal chandelier shattered into silence the moment my wife pointed at me. Security! Her voice echoed across the grand ballroom. Throw him out. Every executive turned to stare. A string quartet stopped playing. Champagne glasses froze halfway to people's lips. Standing beside my wife was Damien Wolf, the city's most celebrated real estate billionaire. His arm rested confidently around her waist. He smiled as if he had already won. One security guard grabbed my arm. "Sir, you've been asked to leave." I looked at my wife, Vanessa Carter. "Are you really doing this?" She didn't hesitate. "You embarrassed me long enough. This party is for people who actually matter." Damien laughed. "Some men never know when they've been replaced." The crowd burst into quiet laughter. Someone whispered, "I heard he was just a maintenance consultant." Another executive shook his head. "Wrong place, wrong man." Vanessa stepped closer and pulled the invitation from my hand. "You don't belong in this building anymore." She dropped the invitation onto the marble floor and crushed it beneath her designer heel. I calmly picked it up, smoothed the paper with my fingers, then looked at the head of security. "I'll leave, if the owner asks me to." Damien smirked. "The owner? He doesn't even know who owns this tower." Neither did Vanessa. Neither did the hundreds of guests surrounding us. Because the 82-story skyscraper where they were celebrating tonight, the one they proudly called Summit 1 Tower, had quietly belonged to me for the past 8 years. And before this party ended, my wife would discover she hadn't just ordered security to throw out her husband. She had ordered them to remove the man who owned the entire building. The security guard blocked my path before I could step onto the red carpet. "I'm sorry, sir." His tone remained professional. "But your name is on the removal list." For a brief moment, I assumed there had been a mistake. Tonight was Sterling Dynamics' executive celebration, hosted inside Summit 1 Tower, one of the most prestigious skyscrapers in downtown Chicago. More than 500 guests filled the marble lobby. Corporate executives, investment bankers, city officials, television reporters. Crystal chandeliers reflected across the polished black floor, while a string quartet played softly near the grand staircase. It was supposed to be the biggest night of my wife's career. Instead, it was becoming the end of our marriage. "I think you're mistaken," I said calmly. "My wife invited me." Before the guard could answer, a familiar voice echoed through the lobby. "No, I didn't." Every conversation nearby stopped. I slowly turned. Vanessa Brooks walked toward me wearing an elegant midnight blue designer gown. Camera flashes followed her every step. She had spent years climbing Sterling Dynamics' corporate ladder. Tonight she was being introduced as the company's youngest executive vice president. Walking beside her was Damien Wolf, 43 years old. Perfectly tailored tuxedo, confident smile. The charismatic CEO everyone believed would soon become one of the most powerful businessmen in Chicago. His hand rested comfortably against Vanessa's back. Far too comfortably. She stopped only a few feet away, then looked directly at the security supervisor. "I asked that he not be allowed inside." The supervisor nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am." I looked at Vanessa. "So it's true." She folded her arms. "I didn't want a scene." "Then why invite me at all?" "I didn't. You assumed you still belonged here." Several executives slowed their pace, pretending to check their phones while secretly listening. Corporate gossip traveled faster than elevators. Damien smiled. "I told Vanessa this would happen. Some people never realize when they've already been left behind." He extended his hand toward the ballroom entrance. "You should save yourself the embarrassment. Go home." I ignored him. Instead, I kept looking at my wife. 8 years together. "And this is how you end it?" For the first time, she showed no emotion. "I've spent years pretending I was happy. I'm tired of living a small life." The words landed harder than I expected, because once, she believed the exact opposite. 8 years earlier, Vanessa wasn't chasing luxury. She worked as a junior accountant at a neighborhood nonprofit. I met her during a charity fundraiser restoring abandoned community buildings. Everyone else left when the rain started. She stayed behind, helping volunteers carry supplies into storage. By the time we finished, both of us were completely soaked. She laughed. I guess we're equally terrible at checking weather forecasts. I laughed too. Looks that way. We shared coffee afterward. That coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends together. A year later, we married inside a quiet botanical garden with fewer than 60 guests. No celebrities. No expensive venue. Just family, friends, and promises that sounded permanent. Back then, Vanessa used to tell people, "I'd rather build a life with a kind man than chase money with the wrong one." I believed every word. After our wedding, our life remained surprisingly simple. I drove an old silver SUV. We rented a comfortable apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. Whenever someone asked what I did, I always gave the same answer. I manage commercial property investments. That answer wasn't a lie. It simply wasn't the whole truth. What I never explained was that the properties weren't owned by clients. They were owned by my family's private trust. My grandfather, Harold Brooks, spent 50 years quietly buying commercial real estate across America. Office towers, hotels, luxury apartments, shopping centers, warehouses. Instead of placing everything under his own name, he created the Brooks Heritage Trust. When he passed away, control of the trust became mine. Today, the portfolio was worth more than $28 billion. Very few people knew. That was intentional. My grandfather often told me, "If people meet your money before they meet you, they'll never see the real person." Those words shaped my entire life. Even after I married Vanessa, everything changed the day Damian Wolf joined Sterling Dynamics. He loved attention, magazine interviews, luxury cars, private yachts, social media headlines. Within months, employees treated him like a celebrity. Investors praised every speech. Business magazines called him the visionary who never lost. Vanessa admired him. At first, I thought it was professional respect. Then business dinners became late-night meetings. Weekend conferences became overnight trips. Designer handbags began appearing inside our closet. Whenever I asked where they came from, the answer was always ready. Executive gifts, performance rewards, client appreciation. Each explanation sounded believable. Together, they sounded rehearsed. I returned to the present. The lobby had grown completely silent. Vanessa looked toward security once again. "Please escort him outside. I don't want my promotion remembered because of this." Two security officers approached respectfully. "I'm sorry, sir." As one reached toward my arm, I quietly slipped my hand inside my jacket. Damian smirked. "What now? You planning to argue?" Instead, I removed a slim black titanium access card. No company logo, no employee name, only a small silver crest engraved in one corner. The senior security supervisor looked at it and instantly froze. His confident expression disappeared. His face turned pale, because every security chief assigned to Summit One Tower recognized that card immediately. It wasn't an employee pass. It wasn't a visitor badge. It was the master property authorization card, issued only to the legal owner of the entire building. Before anyone could speak, my phone vibrated. A message appeared from my private attorney. "Mr. Brooks, the trustees have arrived. The board is waiting for your approval." A second notification followed seconds later. "We've finished investigating Damian Wolf. The evidence is complete. Tonight changes everything." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, looked toward the ballroom doors, and realized something almost made me smile. The party hadn't even started, but the building already belonged to the man they were trying to throw out. The senior security supervisor didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the black titanium card resting in my hand. A single drop of sweat rolled down his forehead. He knew exactly what he was looking at. Unfortunately, everyone else assumed he had simply become nervous. Damian laughed. "What are you waiting for? Throw him out. The supervisor swallowed hard. Mr. Wolf. I. Before he could finish, I quietly slid the card back into my jacket. There won't be any need. I'll leave. Vanessa folded her arms. Good. That's the smartest decision you've made in years. For a moment, I simply looked at her. Not with anger. Not with hatred. Only disappointment. Because somewhere beneath the ambitious executive standing in front of me, I could still remember the woman who once believed success had nothing to do with money. That woman no longer existed. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the revolving doors. Behind me, soft laughter spread through the lobby. Someone whispered, "I guess consultants don't belong at executive galas." Another replied, "Poor guy. He probably thought marriage was enough." The doors closed behind me. The cool Chicago night wrapped around the tower. Instead of walking toward the street, I headed for a quiet side entrance used only by building management. Before I reached it, my phone rang. Claire Bennett, the chief legal officer of the Brooks Heritage Trust. I answered. "I'm outside." Her voice remained calm. "We saw everything. I assumed you did. Are you coming upstairs?" "In a minute." She hesitated. "There's something else you need to know." "What?" "The forensic audit is complete." I stopped walking. "And it isn't just Damien. There are 4 executives involved." My expression hardened. "How much?" Claire took a slow breath. "Almost $84 million. Silence. Unauthorized maintenance contracts. Fake renovation invoices. Inflated leasing commissions. Money had quietly disappeared from Sterling Dynamics for almost 3 years. Every transaction eventually connected to companies secretly controlled by Damien Wolf. But one name appeared beside nearly every approval. Vanessa Brooks. I closed my eyes for a second. Did she receive the money? No. Then why is her name there? Because she approved the paperwork. My heartbeat slowed. Knowingly? We can't prove that. I nodded. Then don't treat her like a criminal. Claire understood immediately. We'll separate negligence from fraud. Good. There's a difference. 10 minutes later, I stepped into a private elevator hidden behind an unmarked hallway. No company logos. No directory. Only a fingerprint scanner. The elevator rose silently. Floor 20, 30, 45, 60. Finally, the 72nd floor. Unlike the glamorous ballroom downstairs, this level wasn't decorated for parties. It wasn't designed for executives. It belonged exclusively to the Brooks Heritage Trust. Quiet, private, timeless. The conference room overlooked the entire Chicago skyline. Lake Michigan shimmered beneath the city lights. Inside, 9 trustees were already waiting. Every person stood as I entered. Not because I demanded it. Because my grandfather had earned their respect decades earlier. At the center of the room stood Eleanor Brooks, my grandfather's younger sister, the woman who had helped build the family trust from almost nothing. She smiled warmly. "You look exactly like Harold did. When? The night someone underestimated him." I smiled. "I hope I inherited more than his face." "You inherited his patience." Claire placed several folders on the conference table. Across the first one, only 4 words appeared. Summit 1 Tower Ownership. The second read, Sterling Dynamics Investigation. The third, Emergency Board Resolution. Eleanor folded her hands. "The evidence is overwhelming." Claire opened the investigation file. Damien created 6 shell companies. Those companies build Sterling Dynamics for renovation work that never existed. Payments were approved internally, then transferred overseas. She changed the screen. Rows of financial records appeared. Dates, invoices, bank transfers, digital signatures. Every line eventually led to Damien. But the final approval almost always belonged to Vanessa's executive office. I frowned. She trusted the wrong person. Claire nodded. "That's our conclusion too." Eleanor changed the subject. "What about tonight?" I looked toward the city lights. "They think I'm gone." They're celebrating. Good. One trustee looked confused. You aren't stopping the party? No. Why? I smiled faintly. Because arrogant people reveal themselves when they think they've already won. Soft laughter spread around the room. Eleanor nodded proudly. Exactly what your grandfather would have said. Claire checked her watch. The CEO's presentation starts in 40 minutes. The shareholders are already arriving. What about Damien? He believes tonight he'll announce Sterling Dynamics expansion into Europe. I closed the investigation folder. He still will. Several trustees exchanged surprised looks. Claire frowned. You want him to finish? Yes. Why? I stood and walked toward the enormous window. Far below, the ballroom glowed with music and celebration. People laughed. Photographers moved through the crowd. Champagne continued flowing. No one realized the building surrounding them was quietly preparing for something entirely different. I turned back toward the room. Confidence makes people careless. I want Damien speaking at his highest point. So when the truth arrives, everyone remembers exactly how certain he was. No one argued, because everyone understood. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting my grandfather's legacy. And before the final guest left Summit 1 Tower, the man who believed he ruled the room would discover he had been celebrating inside someone else's building. The grand ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. More than 500 guests filled every table. Executives laughed over champagne. Investors exchanged business cards. Television cameras waited near the stage. On the giant LED screen behind the podium, only 6 words glowed brightly. The future of Sterling Dynamics. Damien Wolf adjusted his tuxedo. Confident, relaxed, completely certain the night belonged to him. He stepped onto the stage. Thunderous applause erupted across the ballroom. Vanessa smiled proudly from the front row. To her, this wasn't just another corporate celebration. It was the beginning of the life she had chosen. Damien raised the microphone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight marks the greatest achievement in our company's history. More applause. Our expansion into Europe will make Sterling Dynamics one of the fastest-growing commercial real estate companies in America. The audience nodded approvingly. Business reporters hurriedly typed headlines. Everything appeared perfect. Until the ballroom lights flickered. The giant presentation screen suddenly went black. Damien frowned. He looked toward the technical booth. Can someone fix that? Nobody answered. A few seconds later, the screen lit up again, but his presentation had disappeared. Instead, one sentence slowly appeared in bright white letters. Special ownership announcement. Confused whispers spread across the room. Damien forced a smile. There seems to be a technical issue. Before he could continue, Board Chairman Richard Holloway calmly walked onto the stage. He gently placed a hand on Damien's shoulder. I'm afraid tonight's schedule has changed. Damien looked irritated. What are you doing? Richard ignored the question. Instead, he turned toward the ballroom entrance. Ladies and gentlemen, there is someone you need to meet before we continue. Every head turned. The enormous wooden doors slowly opened. I walked inside. No bodyguards. No dramatic music. Just quiet footsteps echoing across the marble floor. Beside me walked Claire Bennett carrying a black leather portfolio. The room became silent. Vanessa stared toward the entrance. Her face slowly lost its color. Marcus? She whispered. Damien laughed nervously. What is he doing here? He isn't even an employee. Richard smiled. Actually, that's where you're mistaken. He stepped away from the podium, walked directly toward me, and extended his hand. Welcome, Mr. Marcus Brooks, owner of Summit 1 Tower. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Camera shutters echoed throughout the ballroom. Vanessa slowly stood. No, she whispered. That's impossible. Damien shook his head. There has to be some mistake. Richard calmly nodded toward Claire. Please, Claire opened the portfolio. One by one, official ownership documents appeared across the enormous LED screen. Brooks Heritage Trust. Legal property owner. Summit 1 Tower. Verified by the state of Illinois. Verified by federal property records. Every legal seal. Every signature. Every document. Authentic. Final. Investors immediately opened their tablets. Several board members compared digital property records. Journalists rushed toward the stage. Vanessa couldn't take her eyes off me. You own the building? I quietly nodded. I have for 8 years. I just never believed ownership needed an introduction. The room fell silent again. Damien grabbed the microphone. So what? You own the building. That doesn't change who built this company. For the first time that evening, I stepped onto the stage. Calmly. You manage offices inside this tower. You don't own the ground beneath them. And tonight, I have something far more important than property documents. Claire slowly lifted another black folder. Across its cover, only 3 words appeared. Corporate fraud investigation. The giant screen changed once more. Rows of financial records began filling the display. Hidden companies. Fake construction contracts. Unauthorized consulting payments. Offshore transfers. Every glowing line, eventually connected to one name, Damien Wolf. The applause that had welcomed him only minutes earlier had completely disappeared. Only silence remained, because everyone in the ballroom realized the celebration they came to witness had just become an investigation. The ballroom stayed silent after Eleanor Blake left. No one chased her. No one whispered. The celebration resumed, but it was different now. People no longer talked about promotions or executive politics. They talked about integrity. The following Monday, I stood inside the mechanical level beneath Orion Tower. Not the luxurious executive offices. Not the penthouse boardroom. The engineering floor. The building's chief maintenance supervisor, Frank Morales, greeted me with a smile. I never thought I'd see the owner down here. I looked around at the humming generators. The people down here keep the lights on. They deserve to be seen. Frank nodded. Most owners never come below the lobby. I didn't build this place to impress investors. I built it so people could build their futures. Word spread quickly. Within weeks, every department inside Orion Tower began changing. Cleaning staff received profit-sharing bonuses. Security officers were promoted through leadership programs. Receptionists received tuition assistance. Small businesses leasing offices inside the building were offered reduced rent during difficult economic periods. Instead of rewarding only executives, we rewarded everyone who helped the building succeed. Because a tower isn't held up by the people in the penthouse. It's held up by everyone beneath it. Meanwhile, Sterling Dynamics faced a different future. Its board launched a full internal investigation. Financial records uncovered inflated consulting contracts, unauthorized executive spending, personal expenses disguised as corporate investments. Although Eleanor had never stolen company money, she had approved decisions without asking enough questions. Her position became impossible to defend. Within a month, she resigned. Not because anyone forced her, because she finally accepted responsibility. One quiet afternoon, my assistant informed me someone wanted to see me. Eleanor Blake is downstairs. I looked through the office window toward the city skyline. For several moments, I said nothing. Then I nodded. Send her up. She entered wearing simple clothes. No designer handbag. No expensive jewelry. No executive badge. Only honesty. She stood quietly. I won't stay long. I motioned toward the chair. You don't have to stand. She sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally she looked at me. I spent weeks asking myself when everything changed. I listened. I used to admire your kindness. Then I started admiring attention instead. She smiled sadly. I confused visibility with value. I didn't interrupt. I thought powerful people were the ones everyone recognized. She looked into my eyes. but the strongest man I ever met. Never needed anyone to know what he owned. Silence settled between us. Then she slowly removed a small envelope from her purse. Inside was our wedding photograph. I found this while packing. She placed it gently on the table. I couldn't throw it away. Neither could I, because despite everything, those memories had once been real. She took a slow breath. I'm not asking for another chance. I know. I only wanted to apologize. I nodded. Thank you. She smiled through tears. You've already forgiven me, haven't you? I answered honestly. I forgave you a long time ago. She looked surprised. But forgiveness doesn't always rebuild trust. She closed her eyes for a moment. I understand. She stood. This time, there were no dramatic speeches, no promises, no desperate attempts to rewrite the past. Only acceptance. As she reached the door, she stopped. I hope one day, someone appreciates the man I failed to see. Then she quietly left. That was the last time I ever saw Eleanor Blake. Months passed. Orion Tower became known as one of the most respected commercial buildings in the country. Not because it was the tallest or the most expensive, because companies inside it wanted to stay. Employees felt valued. Small businesses grew. Communities benefited. Investors noticed something unusual. Profit continued rising, even while employee satisfaction reached record levels. Some people called it an innovative business strategy. I called it common sense. 1 year later, I stood outside the main entrance just before sunrise. The bronze plaque beside the revolving doors reflected the morning light. Engraved beneath the Orion Tower name were the words my grandfather had insisted should never be removed. Buildings shelter businesses. Character shelters people. I ran my hand gently across the letters. An elderly janitor walked past carrying his coffee. Morning, Mr. Bennett. Morning, Carlos. He smiled and continued inside. He never treated me differently because I owned the building, and I never wanted him to. My phone buzzed. A message from the board appeared. Orion Property Group valuation, $24.8 billion. A second message followed. Occupancy rate 100%. Employee satisfaction, highest in company history. I smiled. Not because of the numbers, because my grandfather had been right. Owning a building doesn't make someone important. The way they treat the people inside it does. My wife once ordered security to throw me out because she believed I didn't belong. She never realized the building itself was part of my family's legacy. But in the end, I didn't win because I owned the tower. I won because I refused to let betrayal change my character. Some people measure success by the height of the building they stand in. I learned real success is measured by how many people feel respected when they walk through its doors. I looked toward the rising sun reflecting across Orion Tower's glass walls. Then I smiled and walked inside.